right. Hello, Hannah.
Hi.
It's good to see you today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome to all the folks that are joining us today, or all the people that are going to possibly watch this down the road once it makes it onto our website. Super glad to have you here as part of our bereavement and grief conference. Well, hey, there's going to be music later and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's a concert of different people's voices coming together.
There we go. I like it.
So bereaved families often have questions about what grief can look like in their children and in their teens. Today, Hannah is going to help us understand more about children's grief, possible grief reactions at various developmental stages, and ways for parents and caregivers to provide support. That sounds awesome. So let's get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate you and that warm introduction, and I appreciate everybody who's here today. I hope that our time together feels useful and informative. Feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. I kind of want to just start today by kind of acknowledging the weight of the day. I imagine that you're feeling maybe a little bit of Zoom fatigue, as well as spending the afternoon thinking and talking about grief can create some big feelings for us. So as we kind of spend the next half an hour or so together, if you need to just kind of step away, either emotionally or physically, I really do invite you to do that. So maybe thinking about a place that you feel really safe and really calm, and brings you some maybe some strength. It can be a real place. It can be a place that you've only visited in your mind. But I invite you to kind of picture that for a second, and feel free to step away mentally and go there anytime you kind of just need a little recharge. So what my kind of thought for the day is that I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of grief in general, and then maybe a little bit about what we see in kids who are grieving, kind of breaking that down a little bit developmentally, and then talk about how do we help? What are the things that we can do to support the kids in our lives who have experienced the death of somebody that was significant to them? First, I just want to share a little bit about where I'm coming from. Oops, is that the right slide? Yes, sorry. So I am a social worker at Ellie's Place, and what we do is peer-based support. So what we do is we bring kids and teens and families together and offer them the opportunity to share about those experiences. We have 4 different locations here in Michigan: Ann Arbor, Flint, Grand Rapids, and Lansing. I work out of our Ann Arbor branch. And the other thing that we do is support community members. So, folks who are working with kids in a variety of different settings, we are available as, just a community resource, and can offer some clinical consultation in that regard. So let's get started. Just wanted to kind of put this out there so that we're sort of all on the same page when we talk about grief. So grief is really the normal reaction to any loss. At Ellie's Place, we're talking about the grief that comes when around the death of a person, but we recognize that grief can happen for us in lots of ways. Maybe it's a move or switching schools, or kind of what we're all experiencing right now with COVID, and the things that either aren't available to us or no longer with us or have really shifted and changes, and sometimes that stirs up some feelings for us. Or maybe when we think about kind of the folks who are potentially here today, thinking about maybe the grief that comes after receiving a diagnosis, and how that shifts sort of what might be happening for your family, and maybe things that you imagined might be. Grief is really unique to each person, and it's a lifelong process. It's not orderly, it's not predictable, it can be really, really swirly. We used to think about it as being very linear, And now we think about it more of sort of a cycle, and that we can revisit it throughout our lifetime, and that it's going to shift and change as we grow as humans. And we try to really operate from the idea that every person has the capacity to heal. And at Ellie's Place, we try to be that emotionally safe environment so that folks can start to kind of build that coping toolbox, especially our kids. So when we think about children's grief, and specifically, we know that kids can't comprehend that death is final and universal or irreversible until about the age of 8 or 9. They're just not there yet. Like developmentally, their brains they can't hold on to that concept. They're working on it. They'll get there, but they just can't grab it. So kind of what that looks like is that the kids might, up until kind of that 8, 9, 10-year-old age, they might ask the same questions. They might need you to tell them the same story over and over again. And that can be really hard as the grown-ups in their world. We also know that kids have a really short sadness span. We get a lot of questions at Ellie's Place about, they were laughing and giggling and having fun with their cousins at the funeral. I think they're doing okay. It just means that they needed to kind of ride that wave. They can be, feeling sad and kind of those heavier emotions for a minute, but then they got to go be just regular old kids and go and play and run around outside. They just can't sit there for too long. Kids are really still building their feeling vocabulary, so they might not have the words to be able to explain to you exactly what is happening inside of themselves. And so what we see is that it comes out as behavior. And so then we can sort of respond to that. The other thing that, grief kind of does for kids is it makes them feel potentially different from their peers. And lots of kids don't want to be different. And so, having this big life event happens, they can kind of feel isolated. So a place like Ellie's Place lets them come together with other kids who really get it, and they can share their thoughts and their feelings about that. So some more just kind of general kids' grief. Kind of like I said a minute ago, they need to revisit their grief developmentally, just because they're growing and they're changing and understanding it differently, and they're understanding what the loss means to them at different points in their lives. We kind of talk about that as like a grief burst. Again, they have some limited coping skills, so it comes out as acting out or maybe as behaviors. And so, always trying to think about what are the ways that we can support kids in dealing with this loss in a healthy way, giving them sort of those expression tools or those outlets. Kids really look to the grown-ups in their lives to model grief expression. So, it is okay to cry in front of your kid and to talk about like, wow, I'm just feeling really, really sad right now. And kind of letting them see that and know that, it's okay to feel sad sometimes. As well as that can create some conversation and some openness within a family to be able to talk about the person who died, and that we're all having feelings about it because this was really, really big. The other things that we sometimes see with kids is that they tend to blame themselves, even if, we know as grown-ups that, they didn't have anything to do with it. They're not the cause of it. But kids are really egocentric. And sometimes when they don't know what's happening or things aren't being honestly told to them, this could be with a death or even with a diagnosis, all the medical questions that come up. Kids will put themselves at the middle and help us as the grown-ups, kind of helping them to sort of unpack that a little bit, and being truthful and honest about that can be a helpful tool in there. So when we think about kids, I'm going to kind of break it down into some different age group ranges. And this is just sort of generally what we might see for kids who are grieving. A lot of what we see is that, it's typical developmental stuff, but when you add grief to the mix, sometimes things that are, we're already seeing can just be a little bit magnified or might, come to light in a different way. So the little ones, kind of those newborns all the way up through, 2, maybe 3 years old, when somebody has died, they are really reacting to the feelings. right? Like they're such intuitive little beings that, they notice, they feel it, they sense it, that something is off, something has shifted. So maybe it was their primary caregiver who died, and now that person isn't there anymore. So they're noticing that loss. They're noticing that person isn't there anymore. They can be really sensitive to the folks who are caring for them, and noticing again that things have shifted. We kind of expect that, maybe there'll be some regression, maybe there'll be some just changes in, sleeping and eating and kind of their general mood. Kind of the next age group is this sort of 2 to 5-year-olds. They, again, have a limited awareness of death. Like they don't understand yet that it's final, and that people don't come back. And that can be hard because they kind of believe at times that death is reversible. Like, yes, grandma died, but is she going to come to my birthday party? They can't connect those dots yet. So they'll ask the same questions again and again. They don't really recognize yet that that it will happen to them. They think that, people might live forever. Again, they'll ask those same questions over again. And sometimes a big thing that comes up for this age group is they worry that about who's going to take care of them. And so, kind of letting them know what the plan is if something were to happen to their immediate caregivers. The next age group is these 6 to 8-year-olds. They really play out. I mean, all the kids do, right? Play is the way that they process. Play is it's their work. So they have sort of a broadened understanding cognitively of death and that it's final. And they're sort of trying to kind of make sense of that. That's really big for them, and understanding that. So, talking to them about that. A lot of their feelings come out again as actions and behavior. They're still building their coping toolbox. We might see some regression with age group. They don't want to be different. And again, grief makes them different. They might start to hold it in a little bit more. So, our younger kids might be more outward with their grief or their thoughts or their feelings, and these kids start to tuck it in a little bit. So, finding some different ways for them to express themselves. The next age group is kind of that 9 to 12. We're starting to enter adolescence. They really do have a great understanding of the finality of death. They're less spontaneous with their feelings. This group sometimes will focus on kind of like if there's scary details or there's things that maybe create some fear. They're trying to understand those. So they might talk and fixate a little bit on those specifics. We might see, a little bit more irritability, a little bit more worries around body aches or things that are happening physically, and worrying that maybe that is something that's harmful to their bodies. Especially if there was like an illness, so maybe somebody had stomach cancer and they have a stomach ache, and then they worry that could be cancer too. And this is kind of our, late middle schoolers, teenagers. It's a little confusing because they are still so dependent, but are really, really wanting to be independent. They don't want to ask for help. They want to do it on their own. They've got it, but they still need, a lot from the grownups in their lives. They also start to dabble a little bit in some risk-taking behavior because they have this sense that they're invincible. And so we see them sort of, driving fast or starting to experiment with, drugs or alcohol. And that coupled with that sense of invincibleness can be kind of a dangerous combination. So we want to be really watchful around that. These folks, these kids will, if they're, if they have sort of maybe a religious background or a connection to a faith, they might start to question that. What's interesting is sometimes we see people go, more towards their faith, but also sometimes people kind of pull away from it. And sort of that spiritual questioning can start to come out in this age group. All right, so what do we do, right? Like we've got all this stuff. these kids are, exhibiting maybe some behaviors or, expressing some things verbally, or we're just wanting to make sure that they've got, supports in place so that they, as they grow and they change and they become, adult people, that they are managing their grief in as healthy a way as possible. These are some suggestions that are really just about supporting anybody who's experiencing grief, your friend or your colleague or your, partner or your family member, just trying to be present and being authentic, especially with kids. Like, they know when you're not being real, right? Like they can read us really, really well. So being, be true to you, find something that works for you. At Ellie's Place, we, practice reflective listening, and that's just really kind of like finding that feeling and acknowledging it and validating it, and not trying to change or shift it in any kind of way. Listen more and talk less. Being that quiet witness to somebody's pain might not feel like we're doing a tremendous amount, but it's really, really powerful. Just knowing that somebody is there and hears you is a real gift. It makes it real. Trying to give lots of space for, particularly for kids to share, not trying to, cheer them up or to fix it or change the feeling. Really trying to, not minimize it, really just being there to allow that emotional expression, and showing that empathy to them. And even saying like, I'm really, really glad that you told me that. I don't quite know what to say, but I appreciate that you shared that with me. It's kind of a way to show some empathy to them. Because again, like, our goal isn't to take it away, because we can't take away that pain, but we can be present with them in it. So when we're thinking about kids and supporting them as they're grieving, we really try to encourage honesty, and kind of that truthful and useful information is kind of laying the groundwork for them to heal. When kids don't know, they start to make stuff up. So telling the truth, even when it's hard, and know that it's okay. It's okay to bring it up, and it's okay to say, if they're asking questions and you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, I don't know. But if I find out, I'll tell you. And kind of leaving that door open for them to ask questions. Saying, what other questions do you have? Here's what I know. Layering in the information, and providing more details over time, but really letting kind of kids guide that conversation using that really simple, concrete, age-appropriate language. Because you don't want to overwhelm them. And then again, that lets them kind of guide the conversation and take in what they can. And they might come back to you and ask the same question again. And then you can say, remember when we talked about, and then, give it to them again. Because it's not a one-time conversation. It's going to be a lifetime, because they're going to understand it just in different ways. So some more ways to support kids who are grieving is, giving them choices, creating those safe spaces for them to go, both physically and emotionally. Maybe it's a bedroom, maybe it's a couch, maybe it's, just with a certain person, and kind of giving them that choice. This makes me think a little bit about if there's, a person has died and there's going to be some kind of a service, maybe a funeral or a memorial, and helping kids to understand what that is and what that means, and what they might expect, and then giving them choice around how they want to participate. Do they want to participate? And if they need an out, maybe identifying somebody who can come and maybe, take them outside if it gets to be too much for them. Kind of keeping those, routines and boundaries and rules can be helpful because it's predictable. So the kids can, feel secure in that. Really encouraging them to play. especially for the little ones, that projective play, like being able to kind of role play it out, process their feelings. That's really how they work through things. And then just some sensitivity around days that might create some additional feelings. The anniversary of the day that the person died, maybe the person's birthday, maybe the kid's birthday, those other national holidays that come up. Even things like school assignments might kind of sneak in. Maybe the person died from an illness, and then all of a sudden this kid gets an assignment of a book and the person died from a similar illness, and that could create some feelings that we just want to be mindful and build some support in around for those. So then we also want to just be thoughtful about when more help might be needed. Right? Grief it's natural, it's normal, it's universal. We're all going to experience it at some point. But we want to be thoughtful about, if we're noticing that it's really interfering with kind of day-to-day activities. Are we noticing a big shift in change or, problems at school or at work? Is it harder to kind of do your daily things? Are we noticing, some increased aggressiveness or angry? Or if this person is feeling really, really, really sad, if they're feeling depressed or withdrawing or not doing the things that they used to want to do. Those are the times that we want to think about, okay, we want to get this person some additional support. And certainly if there's risky behaviors or thoughts of suicide or self-harm, we want to make sure that that person's getting connected to the right kind of support to help them through that. And to kind of wrap up, just again, some more information about Ellie's Place. Again, we're a healing center for grieving kids and teens. We're not a crisis center. If somebody does call and is interested in our support group program or has questions just about, a kid in their lives, our practice is to return that call within 24 hours, one business day. As well as to just, have that conversation and to offer the support that we can, and then to figure out kind of what's the right avenue for this person who's connecting with us. That's it. Questions?
That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience. I had one that was, when you look at like age groups, as you transition into young adulthood, I'm sure that once you hit 18, it's not like there's some magic knowledge or comfort. And clearly all those are generalizations, right? Because it's going to depend on developmental and so many different factors and coming into someone's life. But are there any things that you notice about young adults as they make that transition, kind of become more independent, a lot of them?
Yeah. I don't know if there's something specific that I notice. I think that, again, they're at Ellie's Place, kids can come until they've graduated from high school. And so that can be sort of, bittersweet in some ways.
Sure.
And trying to sort of build that bridge for them so that they continue to have access to support. I guess what comes to mind is that independence versus dependence, like so much is shifting and changing for them. And this is another transition and their person isn't there for it. So maybe it's another time where they, are having one of those grief bursts and we want to, hopefully they've got their toolbox and they can pull on some of those. But then there are, like just what are the things that are relatable to them that can feel supportive, so we know that group of people tends to rely heavily on social media, so are there ways that we can connect them in that kind of way, break down that isolation for them, and make sure that they're able to connect with folks in the ways that are comfortable or approachable to them.
Yeah, it seems like that's a transition in so many parts of your life to experience grief or loss during that time has to be almost overwhelming because of all the aspirations or opportunities or what people are looking forward to, and to feel like some of that is being taken away, you know.
Yeah.
And you're losing all that fun of being a kid.
Yeah.
To having to adult at that point, right?
Now the responsibility starts.
Yeah.
And just, it's an enormous time of transition. And, you know, maybe your person's not there to see you doing that, or to, you know, cheer you on, or to support you, or, you know, watch you come into that. And that's really hard.
Well, Hannah, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and for being willing to help teach us to learn some new skills, some awareness. Certainly, I was very appreciative of kind of being able to break those parts down a little bit and understand about working with kids, and kind of where they're coming from. That's super helpful. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. I appreciate being a part of this, and I hope that the information is useful, you know, for those of you out there. And feel free to reach out if, you know, there's additional questions or things that, you know, you feel like Ellie's Place staff can be helpful with. Happy to have those conversations.
Super grateful to have Ellie's Place support our program today, and glad that we can be good partners for our community. Well, thanks again. Have a great rest of your day at the conference here, and or the concert, apparently, as I think it was. You had the one.
Kind of like both.
You had the one part in there where it was listen more, talk less, and I could not think of anything but Hamilton, where Aaron Burr says, "Talk less, smile more." Like, that's going to be my key now. Anytime that I'm helping support someone through grief, I'm going to go to my happy place of Hamilton, and thank Alexander Burr for, or I'm sorry, Aaron Burr for giving me that line.
Yeah. So. Yes, that's a good one. I hadn't made that connection. That one's going to be in my head.
Always in my head.
Those Hamilton songs do that.
Indeed.
They for real do that.
All right. Well, thanks again, Anna. Have a great day, and
thanks, Patrick.
We'll catch up again soon.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks so much.
You bet.